blister. You could opt to give them another layer on the bottom of their foot, which could act as another like shock absorber. And that shock absorber would be second skin. Okay, so second skin is like a jelly pad that you would cut into the shape that you need and put that first on the skin and then the gauze. Second skin is meant to be just what its name says, another layer of skin in there, okay? And so that could be a really good option for somebody. I would use that as last case scenario, because what we find with the second skin is when pressure's been applied to it, it crumbles, it starts to disintegrate. And so sometimes you find that it sort of migrates out of the area where it actually you put it, especially when it's on the bottom of the foot. When it's on the top of a toenail bed or on the inside of the toe, it doesn't seem to migrate as much because it's not getting direct pressure. But somebody who's twisting and really pivoting off of their met head, they could twist this right out of place and then it ends up like, you know, coming out of the tape job. So it's a last resort to add some kind of jelly pad to the bottom of the foot, just because it could migrate and it'll disintegrate.
Does that go like first and then the donut thing and then the
No, you would still do the donut first because you delineate your shape. And then you put either your second skin or your gauze, and then you put your coveralls. You always want to put your donut first. Okay, so then what we'll do is we'll talk through the great toe. So let's talk about injuries to the great toe. Could just be the nail bed, right, the hematoma. You could have a really bad ingrown toenail that the shoe is pushing against and it's really painful for the athlete. You could also have, there's a little bit of a callus here starting. This callus here could turn into a blister. So let's do a couple different things here. So let's do, if it is on the medial side of the toe, again, I would have sprayed. Now I'm in a smaller area though. So what you could do is you could take a Q-tip, spray the end of a Q-tip, and paint your spray on. So any areas that are really small, you could paint it instead of doing a big gushing spray. So what we'll do is we'll kind of come around that callus that's right there. Let's use that and say that's actually an open blister. And I went around it again. I got rid of my excess. Now here I might want to use my second skin because I know that's kind of a safe zone. And she's not going to bear all her weight, but she's obviously bearing some weight through her great toe there because she's got a callus. So she might have a little pronation or overpronation. So you just layer on that piece. So you just use the small piece. Layer the gauze so you fill the hole. And then what you'll do is you'll need to make a different set of strips now. You'll need to make ones that fit the big toe. And so this is where you want to try to create these nice shapes. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to use a hat, what we call a hat, for the tape. Because I don't want this to just start falling apart on me. So we're going to just go right over the toe. And we're going to create a little hat right there. Okay? Now depending on the size of the toe that you're working on, especially if it's the second toe or third toe that has an issue, I would make these strips even thinner because you don't want to have all these dog ears around. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do another hat going in the totally opposite direction, perpendicular to what you just did. Because that's going to give a layer of padding here because she's still going to hit the end of the shoe and that could disintegrate your coverall, okay? Because again, the coverall is very thin. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go around like a spiral. So you can either have the athlete help you by spreading their own toes, or you can have them do it for you and pull it apart, or you just kind of maneuver. So I'm just kind of going around now. I'm going around the whole toe, trying to create a secure border. I'm not going to go down into the med head. I want to stay pure to the toe up, okay? From there, I could do another spiral if I felt like I missed a couple areas. And then after you've done that, you would go back again and you would do 2 hats again, because you want to finish by protecting again the end of the toe. So depending on the size of the toe, if I need to go around 2 times, again, just to really reinforce the coverall, because the coverall is thin, so it'll break down maybe even here. And then I'm going to do 1 more hat on the top, and I'm going to crisscross this hat to go in the complete opposite perpendicular direction. So you've got 2 hats, 2 spirals, 2 hats. That's traditionally what you want to do for the toes. Now, if you have a particular athlete that's like, that feels like a lot of tape, it feels very thick, you could pare that down depending on what they need, because sometimes they lose the ability to feel either the ground or in their shoe when they have tape on. So that's a personal preference from an athlete. If you feel like this really needs to be protected, I would be like, you know, I really need you to have some extra tape there. Okay, so then once you're completely done with the tape job and everything looks good, the last step for toes is you need to take your lube, that big jar of lube, the same lube you use for your heel and waist pads, and you're going to put a little lube on the inside of the toe that's adjacent, and you're going to put it on the same toe where the tape is. Because what you don't want is any friction to be here, and then you develop a blister on the second toe or the adjacent toe. If you've taped the second toe, you need to put lube on the inside of both, next to the first and next to the third, so that you make sure that there's no rubbing at all. Okay? That's really just for the toes. You don't need lube under here, because lube is just going to make that person slosh around in their shoe. Okay? So that's for this guy. Now, if we go to the second toe is harder. The second toe, usually what will happen is we'll just have a hematoma, right? It'll just be like a blackened toenail, and the nail bed's really irritated, but it's painful, especially if the second toe is longer than the first, and that's what's hitting the end of the shoe. And so what you want to do is, this area is really small to kind of get around. So what you would do in this instance is just what's called a bumper. So you would take still that the foam, and instead of wrapping around it like a donut, you would just put it at the end, and depending on how sore the toe is, you could put it on the top. So now the shoe is going to touch this piece of foam and this piece, and completely avoid the nail bed that's been injured. Okay? So from there, we do the same sort of scenario. If it's a nail bed, for sure, I'm going to put on a very small piece of this second skin. I'm just going to make a little bit of a shape that looks like a nail. We'll put it on right in between there. Now for this toe, this is where I might have got out my Q-tips and started and really just started to paint, because once you start to spray all the toes are going to get it, and so it's going to be kind of strange. So that's where they're going to have spray everywhere, which is going to feel a little uncomfortable. Okay, so you're going to do the same kind of thing I said for the big toe. You're going to do 2 hats. Now this is where I'm going to need help, because there's 2 toes. So you have the athlete reach down. I'm going to, just like that, she's going to help me.
I don't know my toes.
And then again, I just try to capture those hats. Get them on. That way nothing starts to fall off and fall apart. And it depends. And I say that because, where did I put my other here? I say that because if you're out on a sideline, there's wind. And sometimes there's rain. And that's the stuff that will blow off a piece of gauze. And it'll blow around your coverall when you're trying to put it on. Now, to be easy with the coverall, I'm going to keep part of this on, okay, here. And I'm going to start below. And she's doing a good job keeping it open. And I'm just going to come around like a spiral.
How much are you overlapping for the spiral?
I try to still overlap. You know, I try to always have like a 50% rule. And then I'm just going to capture the top there. So if I'm happy with that, now the smaller toes, you go around actually more than the bigger toes. So I'm happy with what we just did there. And so I'm just going to then put on our last two hats. And again, with the coverall, I'm going right into that coverall, that box. I am not, you know, cutting into the box. I'm cutting along it, taking the strips the size that I think I need. And then you finish with your two hats. One going one direction, one going the other. Smooth it all down, lube, lube, and done with the toe job, with the toe taping.
Do you have to put lube on this toe too?
Yeah.
Okay.
The whole thing here, here, and then this side. You got to go adjacent toes. Anything that's touching that tape has to have lube on it. Okay? Just a thin layer. Don't go crazy with it, but just a thin layer. It's got to be there. That's the final step of a tape job for the toe. Don't skip that step. Okay, so then lastly, let's go to your other foot. I just want to show you how to do the great toe on the other side. And then as we break, you guys will have time to go through each one of these and just practice and take your time through each one. But they all look